Sagittarius, 9 lessons to ensure no one ever disrespects you again. Just follow this. Sagittarius, take a deep breath. You've always walked this world with fire in your soul and truth on your tongue. But even the brightest flame can flicker when it's met with cold winds of disrespect. Have you ever felt like your sincerity was mistaken for weakness? Like your boundless generosity was taken not as a gift, but as something others felt entitled to? You weren't imagining it. And no, it wasn't your fault. You see, you're a sign born to roam, to speak truth, to love boldly. But sometimes in your quest to uplift others, you forget to protect the very core of your own worth. Today we change that. Today we begin a journey, not to become harder but to become clearer. To become softer in heart, yet firmer in boundary. To learn that being kind doesn't mean being silent. That walking away doesn't make you cruel. It makes you whole again. In this sacred space, I'll guide you through 9 transformative lessons. Each one will help you reclaim the respect, dignity, and peace that are your birthright. This isn't just advice, it's a homecoming. If this resonates with your heart, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe to our community here at Zodiac Wisdom. Together we rise not by changing who we are, but by remembering the power we've had all along. Gate 1, stop explaining yourself. The return to self-worth. Sagittarius, let me ask you something tender but true. How many times have you dimmed your light just to make others feel more comfortable in your presence? You are a fire sign. Wild, expansive, unapologetically honest. But in a world that often asks you to be smaller, quieter, more palatable, you've learned to explain yourself, to soften your edges, to speak gently when you wanted to roar. Not because you lacked courage, but because you loved. Because you hoped that if you just explained your intention, your silence, your distance, someone would finally understand you. But here's the truth that hurts before it heals. Those who need constant explanation never really intended to understand you. They listen only to respond. They ask questions not to know you but to control you. And every time you explain your wild heart to someone who fears its freedom, you shrink yourself just a little more. Sagittarius, it's time to stop. Not because you don't have the words, not because you're angry, but because the purest parts of you no longer need justification to exist. You don't need to explain your silence when someone offends you. You don't need to justify why you walked away from a place that made you feel small. You owe no one a TED Talk about your boundaries. You are not arrogant for choosing peace. You are not selfish for protecting your time. You are not cold for walking away from chaos. Let's be honest. How many times have you said, "I'm sorry," when you weren't the one who hurt anyone? How many times have you felt the need to soften the truth, edit your words, or rehearse your tone, just so someone else wouldn't feel discomfort in the face of your clarity? You've been told your independence is intimidating, that your honesty is too blunt. But let's turn that narrative around. Your truth is medicine. It's not meant for everyone. And that's okay. You are not meant to be everyone's cup of tea, Sagittarius. You are fire, meant to light paths, warm hearts, and sometimes burn away what no longer serves. There comes a moment in every Sagittarian's journey where they must stop apologizing for their freedom. That moment is now. And do you know what happens when you stop explaining yourself? You reclaim your energy. You take back the hours you used to spend justifying your kindness, your distance, your evolution. You silence the noise that says you must always be agreeable to be loved. And you stand in the center of your truth, not louder but taller. That is the essence of sovereign living. Sovereign living means walking into a room and not looking for approval. It means sitting at the table without needing an invitation. It means speaking your truth not to convince, but because you owe it to your own soul. In this state, something beautiful unfolds. The people who never really valued you will fall away. Not with drama, but with silence. And those who truly see you won't need an explanation. They'll feel you. They'll honor your unspoken boundaries. They'll respect your rhythm. You will lose some people, yes, but you'll find yourself again. And isn't that the deeper truth, Sagittarius? That you've been seeking not applause but alignment. Not noise but clarity. Not crowds, but soul companions who don't require subtitles to understand your silence. So the next time someone asks why you're pulling away, don't explain. The next time someone accuses you of being too much or too distant, don't defend. Just breathe. Just smile. Just walk. Let your presence be your response. Let your absence be your answer. You were not born to live under anyone's microscope. You were not meant to constantly decode your own soul for those who never tried to meet you halfway. You are here to roam, to explore, to love without conditions, but also to protect your sacred fire. You are here to say, I do not owe you my softness if you offer me your disrespect. And most of all, you are here to remember, your worth is not up for debate. Not today. Not ever. From this moment forward, live not as someone seeking permission, but as someone reclaiming power. Your fire is not a flaw, it is your compass. And when you stop explaining why it burns, you finally remember why you were born to blaze. Gate 2 boundaries are not walls. They are the way you survive. Sagittarius, you are the eternal traveler of the zodiac. Not just across oceans and mountains, but through emotions, dreams, and truths. And in your boundless heart lies a beautiful danger. The instinct to give until you're empty. You don't love in halves. You don't show up halfway. You pour, offer, stretch, and sometimes disappear into the service of others. But let me tell you something no one may have said out loud to you before. Love is not enough if it costs you yourself. There are times you've let others cross invisible lines. Times you've stayed up past exhaustion to comfort a friend who never asks how you are. Times you've said yes when your soul was whispering no. Not because you're naive, but because your spirit is naturally generous. You believe in redemption. You believe people can change. You believe your love can heal. But Sagittarius, you cannot heal others at the cost of your own peace. Setting boundaries isn't an act of distance. It's an act of deep connection to your own soul. It's how you declare, I am sacred ground. You may visit, but you may not trample. You have to stop thinking that saying no makes you hard. That pulling back makes you cold. That closing a door means you're no longer loving. On the contrary, boundaries are how your love survives. How it stays pure. How it avoids becoming resentment. Think about it. How many times have you forgiven too quickly, not because they deserved it, but because you didn't want to lose them? How many times have you answered late-night messages, not because you had energy, but because guilt whispered, they need me? But who's there when you need you? You are not an emotional motel for people to check into when they're tired of their own chaos. You are not a spiritual fixer-upper. You are not a bridge they burn and expect to find rebuilt when they're ready to return. Sagittarius, you are a soul with divine fire. You don't need to dim your warmth just to keep someone from freezing. You don't need to prove your love by how much you endure. The truth is, boundaries don't push people away. They show you who was never meant to stay. The right people, they won't mind your limits. In fact, they'll respect you more for them. Because healthy love doesn't panic when met with a boundary. It breathes deeper. So I ask you now, can you say no without feeling like you're abandoning someone? Can you pause before giving and ask, is this love or is this sacrifice? Can you walk away not to teach someone a lesson, but simply because it no longer feels safe to stay? These are not questions of courage. These are questions of self-recognition. And let me share something from my own life. I once kept giving to someone who praised my strength, but only came around to borrow it. They mistook my light for a lantern to guide themselves out of the dark, and never once asked if I had batteries left. The day I said no, the silence was loud, but it was also sacred. I sat with guilt, yes, but also with a new kind of peace. A peace that whispered, you just saved your own life. That's what boundaries do. They don't require confrontation. They require clarity. They're not declarations of war. They're declarations of value. They're not barriers to love. They're protectors of love. From today on, Sagittarius, let your life be guided by this mantra. I choose relationships that nourish, not deplete. I choose spaces that honor my expansion, not require my collapse. I choose to protect my light, so I can keep lighting the way. You will be misunderstood. Some will say you've changed. Some will accuse you of being distant, detached, selfish. Let them, because finally you're choosing yourself not to isolate, but to integrate all parts of your truth. You're not building walls. You're building doors with locks, and only those with respectful hands get keys. Sagittarius, this lesson is not just for your emotional survival. It's for your spiritual sovereignty. Because when your boundaries are clear, your energy flows freely. Your fire burns cleaner. And those who cannot handle your wholeness will quietly fade. making room for those who were always meant to walk beside your wild, worthy soul. Gate 3. Spiritual love. The connection that doesn't diminish you. Sagittarius, let's talk about something deeper than romance. Resonance. That soul-to-soul current that doesn't just touch your heart, but awakens your spirit. You've searched for it, haven't you? That feeling of being seen without performance. That connection where words are optional because presence is enough. But before you ever find that kind of love, you must remember this truth. Not everyone who feels like home is meant to be your future. You've mistaken chemistry for destiny before. You've confused emotional chaos with depth. You've told yourself, if I just love harder, they'll finally see me. But Sagittarius, your love is not a mirror for someone else's healing. You were never meant to shrink so another could feel tall. You were never meant to edit your fire so someone else could remain comfortable in the cold. You were born with a map inside your heart. A compass that points not to people who tolerate you, but to souls who recognize you. People who don't require you to explain your joy or hide your sorrow. People who don't run from your freedom, but run with you side by side. That's spiritual love. It doesn't demand that you erase yourself to maintain peace. It doesn't mistake emotional dependency for loyalty. It doesn't make you question your intuition over and over again. So if you're still holding on to someone who only shows up when they need to feel whole, I invite you to ask, is this love? Or is this a transaction? Because true love, spiritual love, will not ask you to beg, bend, or bleed. It will feel like a returning, a remembering. Not fireworks but firelight, steady, luminous, warm. Let me be clear. Not every soulmate is meant to stay. Some show up just to awaken you, not to walk beside you. And that is not a failure. That is a gift. The Sagittarius spirit is not made for cages. It's not made to spend decades stitching together a bond that only unravels in silence. You are a phoenix, not a patchworker. You are meant to rise, not to endlessly repair. You may be tempted to stay in a connection because of history, nostalgia, or the promise of someday. But what if that someday never arrives? What if staying means slowly forgetting who you really are? Real love will never feel like disappearance. It won't make you tiptoe around your own truth. It won't punish you for growing. Instead, it will celebrate your evolution. It will stand at the edge of your expansion and say, go further. I'll meet you there. That's what it means to be spiritually seen. To love and be loved without losing yourself. And if you've never had that before, let me remind you, it exists. But you must meet it at the level of your wholeness. Not your wounds, not your need, not your longing, your wholeness. So here's your invitation. Love yourself the way you wish to be loved. Be the soul companion you've been waiting for. Speak to yourself gently. Forgive yourself daily. Sit with yourself fully. Because when you do, you become magnetic to a different kind of connection. One that doesn't come to complete you, but to walk beside your completeness. It may not come fast. It may not come loud. But it will come. And when it does, you won't need to chase, to explain, to perform. You'll simply feel it, a click, a breath, a stillness. No more questions of do they see me? Because the answer will echo in their eyes. I've seen you before we even met. Sagittarius, this is not fantasy. This is your birthright. But you must first stop entertaining what confuses you. Stop trying to fix what keeps breaking. Stop offering forever to those who barely offer now. Because when you hold space for the right connection, you free yourself from the grip of the wrong one. You were born for depth, for truth, for a love that elevates, not consumes. So the next time someone comes into your life, ask, does this expand me or erase me? And if the answer is anything but expansion, step back. Not in anger, but in reverence for your own soul. Because you, Sagittarius, are not desperate for love. You are destined for something divine. Conclusion: the return to wholeness. Sagittarius, take a breath. You've traveled far through unspoken truths, burned bridges, silent screams, and quiet awakenings. But this isn't just a destination. This is a return, not to someone else, not to a place or a promise, but to yourself. You've learned that you don't need to explain your soul to be worthy. That boundaries are not punishments, they're lifelines. That love, real love, will never ask you to fade to fit. And maybe, just maybe, something in you has shifted. You're not the same person who pressed play at the beginning of this journey. There's a new clarity in your voice, a new steadiness in your silence, and a fire that no longer burns to prove, but to protect. From now on, your presence is no longer a question mark, it is a full sentence. A statement of worth. A quiet revolution. Let others misunderstand your peace. Let them label your silence. You no longer need to be understood by everyone, you only need to be understood by yourself. And when you live in alignment with that truth, the universe will rise to meet you. The people meant for you will feel it in your energy. The places meant for you will call your name. And the love meant for you will feel like remembering. If this journey has resonated with your soul, I invite you gently to like, share, or subscribe. Not out of obligation, but because your voice helps this community grow. Because someone else somewhere is walking the same road, and your light could guide them home. You are whole now, and you were always worthy.